Welcome to the Golden Gems podcast. Today we're taking a deep dive into Robert Schimmel, the comedian who turned terminal illness into art and pioneered the confessional style that dominates comedy today.
It's an absolutely essential deep dive to be having right now. I mean, we're 15 years past his death, and you look at the comedy landscape, it's finally caught up to him.
Right? The top-tier comedians, your Pete Davidsons, your John Mulaney's, they're all working in this trauma plot space.
They are. It's their primary vehicle. But Schimmel didn't just walk that path. He literally built it. He used his own body's decay as the foundation for his entire comedic architecture.
So our mission today is really to figure out how he went from being the blue joke guy to establishing this unprotected truth as a legitimate art form. He's this unacknowledged godfather.
And the question is, where did that radical, just visceral honesty even come from?
Well, you have to start at the very beginning. The Bronx, 1950.
Exactly. He's the son of Betty and Otto Schimmel, and they were two Jewish survivors of the Holocaust. And that fact is not just a biographical detail. It is the structural foundation for everything that comes next.
The sources all suggest that because of that history, survival wasn't some abstract idea in his home. It was the daily reality.
Precisely. And that environment creates a very specific kind of psychological pressure. It wasn't stoicism that came out of it. It was this desperate, almost clawing need to find the absurdity in horror.
If your parents survived that, what could possibly be off limits for a joke?
Nothing. That was his baseline. It was dark, it was uncompromising, and for him it was completely necessary.
But before he was that voice, he was, of all things, a salesman. By the 80s, he's in Scottsdale, Arizona, selling stereo equipment.
And there's such a fascinating connection there, because to sell a stereo, you have to explain the technical specs, you have to overcome objections with this real clarity.
It's a kind of transactional trust.
It is. So later, when he gets on stage to talk about, his failing body or his marriage, he's using that same professional clarity.
He's not just emoting. He's walking the audience through the technical specs of his misery.
Exactly. This is the diagnosis. Here are the drugs. Here's the absurdity of the catheter. That transactional style made the horrific details somehow universal.
But it took a push for him to even try it. His sister, Sandy, basically forced him to go to an open mic.
And his very first line on stage was basically his mission statement for his entire career.
I'm not a comedian.
But everybody has some kind of sexual fantasy or fetish, and mine is humiliation and self-degradation. He was signing a contract of extreme vulnerability right there on stage.
But even then, his future was being dictated by something that happened years earlier. The material calls it the biological Chekhov's gun.
Yeah, this is one of the most tragic ironies of his whole life. During a brief stint in the Air Force around 1970, he gets a routine blood transfusion.
And that blood was contaminated with hepatitis C.
Which back then was basically unknown, untestable. So this microscopic error, this medical accident, just goes completely dormant inside him for 30 years.
An invisible ticking clock.
Literally. Weaving itself into the fabric of his liver, just waiting to dictate the terms of his existence decades down the line. It's the ultimate setup for a comedian's life, right? A guaranteed disaster just waiting to happen.
And it also fed into this recurring theme of what the sources call Schimmel luck.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he moves to LA in the early 80s because a club offered him a regular spot. This was his big break, his way out of selling stereos.
And he arrives to find the club had burned to the ground the night before.
The night before. So he's forced right back into selling stereos, this time in Beverly Hills. It just cemented this persona of being perpetually one step away from success.
That string of bad luck finally broke in 1986.
Thanks to Rodney Dangerfield. He put him on his HBO Young Comedians special, and that's what introduced his blue material to a national audience.
The blue labels suck, but it's kind of reductive.
It's totally reductive. He was known as a comics comic, real technician. Others used profanity for shock, but Schimmel used it for texture, for precision. It was proof he was a writer first. He even wrote for In Living Color.
And his commitment to the material over his career. I mean, the Seinfeld story is legendary.
It defines him. He auditions for George Costanza, probably the biggest comedy role of the decade, and he tells Larry David to his face that the script isn't funny.
He didn't get the part, obviously.
Of course not. But think about that. Rejecting a life-altering opportunity because the joke didn't feel true to him. That's the core of who he was.
And that spirit really culminates in 1999 with his HBO special, Unprotected.
What a brilliant title. It's a triple entendre.
Right. Unsafe sex, which was his brand.
But also his emotional vulnerability on stage and the fact that he was, working without any kind of safety net in his life or his material. He treated the bedroom like a crime scene, using this forensic detachment to analyze human intimacy.
He made the explicit universal.
By being unsparingly honest about humiliation.
Which brings us to 2000. This should have been his moment. He's stand-up of the year. Fox greenlights a sitcom called Schimmel. This is the great what if.
The pilot was shot. And the casting, it's just wild to look back on. His daughter was played by a very young, pre-Oscar Brie Larson.
Wow. I mean, this was his shot at that huge, career-defining network success. It was all ready to go.
And then the Schimmel luck returns with its most devastating blow yet.
The insurance physical.
A routine physical for the show's insurance policy. And the doctors find stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The diagnosis was immediate. The chemo was aggressive. Production became impossible overnight.
Fox held onto the show for 10 months hoping he'd recover.
But they had to cancel it. The whole dream just evaporated. It became this piece of Hollywood lost media, a ghost of a future that was snatched away by biology right at his peak.
And his life from that point on is just a constellation of suffering. The sources explicitly compare it to the biblical book of Job.
And it wasn't just the cancer. He'd already had a massive heart attack in 1998.
But the deepest trauma, the one that broke comedy's biggest taboo, was the death of his 11-year-old son, Derek, from cancer years before.
And he didn't just mourn that. He processed it on stage, using that same unflinching transactional clarity he applied to everything else.
So when he came back to comedy after his own cancer recovery, the act was completely different.
It had totally metamorphosed. He wasn't just the dirty joke guy anymore. He became, the material calls him, a war correspondent from the land of the sick. He was giving reports from the trenches of mortality.
And his memoir, Cancer on $5 a Day, Chemo Not Included, is a masterclass in that.
He was a specialist in finding the absurdity and the indignity. The hospital gown snapping up like a window shade, the sheer weirdness of sperm banking before chemo, the red death drugs.
He let you access these profound truths about being sick without being completely overwhelmed, because he led you there with a joke.
A perfectly crafted, true joke. He proved that nothing was too heavy if the punchline was honest enough.
But even after beating cancer, after the heart attack, that biological Chekhov's gun from 1970 was still ticking.
And the final chapter is just the most shocking irony of all. In January 2010, he goes on Howard Stern and reveals that the hepatitis C infection had finally, after 40 years, turned into advanced cirrhosis. His liver was failing. He needed a transplant.
It's just astonishing. He's facing death not from the things he fought and beat, but from a 40-year-old medical error that was invisible inside him the whole time.
He was dying from a historical footnote, and he leaned into it, of course, but the actual end, the mechanical end of his life, it was the darkest punchline imaginable.
The car accident. August 26, 2010. He was a passenger in a car his daughter was driving.
They swerved to avoid another car, and it rolled. Think about the sheer statistical improbability of it all. This man survives the shadow of the Holocaust, oncology wards, a heart attack, cirrhosis.
Only to die from injuries from a low-speed traffic accident. He passed away a week later at age 60.
It's this dark, cosmic irony. He stared down all the biggest existential threats, and then gets taken out by just random chance.
So looking back now, in 2025, what does his life of uncompromising truth mean for this generation that's basically cashing in on the trauma plot he created?
He's the godfather, plain and simple. His legacy is proving that too much information wasn't a flaw. It's a valid, profound artistic genre. He showed that vulnerability wasn't a risk in the act, it was the foundation.
And his work is finding this new life online. You see kids on YouTube who come for the dirty jokes from his Conan clips.
But they stay for that raw, unsparing vulnerability. They discover the real artist underneath.
The core lesson of his life, it seems, was this unwavering commitment to finding a punchline in the dark.
And in doing that, he proved that the most explicit material, the stuff about hospital gowns and catheters, can actually be the most profoundly human, the most artistically true.
His real contribution wasn't just jokes. It was showing us that sometimes the only way to manage profound suffering is to break it down, analyze its parts, and sell it back to the world as a joke.
And that's exactly why comedy today looks the way it does. He created that space for everyone else.
Thank you for listening to the Golden Gems podcast. We'll be back next time with another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep listening, or keep celebrating the power of uncompromising voices.